डिलीट दाखवते का? ठीक आहे, डिलीट दाखवते ठीक आहे गुगल. हां, डिलीट समस्या दाखवतो. हो हो. हॅलो. हां. बियॉन्ड ब्लूचे चेंजेस झाले होते ना, त्याच्यामध्ये आता काही परत चेंजेस आहेत. आता सगळीकडे 2020चं 2021 केलं ना डेमोवर. हां, ठीक आहे. अबाउट मध्ये जे लिडरशिप बुकचं पेज टाकलं होतं ते आता मध्ये सबमिट केलं. ते सध्या रिमूव्ह करून टाक.
संकेत रूपा मॅडम नाही जॉईन झाल्या. त्यांना लिंक शेअर केली ना मी सॉरी मी केली लिंक. एकदा कॉल झाला का तुझा रूपा मॅडमला?
हॅलो, घनश्यामजी.
येस मॅडम.
हा, आवाज येतोय ना? आम्हाला स्पीकर सर जे आहे त्यांना हा याच्यातला व्हाईट बोर्डचा ऑप्शन चूज करायचा आहे. तर मी शेअर स्क्रीन मधला व्हाईट बोर्ड ऑन करते आणि
ते अजून जॉईन झाले नाहीत मॅडम. ते अटेंडिव्ह मध्ये आलेत का?
या व्हाईट बोर्ड आणि शेअर करून ट्राय करते. पण हा, जस्ट लेट मी नो की
दिसतं मॅडम.
लिहायला कशाने, लिहायचं कशाने आपल्याला टेक्स्ट?
टेक्स्ट तिथं टेक्स्ट म्हणून टाईप करावं लागेल.
अच्छा, टाईप करायला लागेल. ड्रॉ करायचं असेल तर
नाही, ड्रॉचा ऑप्शन नाही, याला फक्त टाईप करायचं ऑप्शन आहे.
टाईपचा ऑप्शन आहे, ड्रॉचा ऑप्शन नाहीये.
ड्रॉचा ऑप्शन नाही मॅडम याला.
क्लिअर माय, हे बघ, क्लिअर माय ड्रॉइंग म्हणून येत आहे. ड्रॉ आहे ना, हा ड्रॉ आहे ना, हा जो ड्रॉचा ऑप्शन आहे.
संकेत
होत नाही, अवघड नाही. एक मिनिट.
बॉक्स स्पेस काय?
हा, हे दाबून ठेवायला लागेल सर. हा, राईट. आणि
मॅडम स्पीकरचं जॉईन झालेत का? तुमच्याच आयडी जॉईन होणार आहे?
माझ्याच आयडी मधून.
ओके, नो प्रॉब्लेम.
ओके ना, तुम्ही एकदा ट्राय करून बघा. एक इरेजर वरती आहोत आपण. युअर टू ड्रॉ ऑप्शन मध्ये जायला लागेल आधी. हा हा, दॅट इज द नॉर्मल थिन लाईन ड्रॉइंग. कंट्रोल दाबून, येस. हे घनश्यामजी, हे दिसतंय का स्पीकर जी ड्रॉ करतायत ते?
हो, दिसतंय सगळं.
दिसतंय ना?
येस
ओके
येस.
ओके, ग्रेट ग्रेट. सो आर वी ऑल सेट? एक मिनिट, आता याच्यातून तात्पुरतं स्टॉप स्क्रीन करतं. आमचा व्हिडिओ ऑफच आहे बरं का. आमचा व्हिडिओ ऑन करताल का?
संकेत, मोर वरती जाऊन ना त्यांचा व्हिडिओ ऑन कर.
जॉईन झालं?
येस, दिला ऍक्सेस त्यांना.
हा, येस. सो या, ठीक आहे. मनीषा इकडे या. तिकडे साईडला सरका. जोशी सर, मला वाटतं तुम्ही या साईडला या, सो दॅट कम्प्युटर इकडे तिकडे सरकवायला सोपं होईल. हे नावाच्या पाठवल्या पाण्याची बाटली, सगळं सगळं काढा. नाही नाही, इट विल गेट जॉईन्ड ऑटोमॅटिकली. आपले आगा खान पॅलेस, लोणावळा आणि शिरवळ असे सुद्धा 3 ग्रुप्स आहेत. काय झालं, सगळं लास्ट मिनिटला आपली थोडी घेतली. जोशी सर, आपल्या सगळ्या जीपीएच्या ग्रुप्सवर गेलाय ना? जीपीएच्या सगळ्या ग्रुप्सवरती गेलाय ना? ते कोविड ग्रुप किंवा दुसरं कोणतं? we'll just wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll start. थोडस हे टेक्निकल गडबडीच्या याने. हॅलो. हा, जे तुम्ही तुमच्याकडचे जे जणांना मेसेज पाठवलेला होता त्यांना नवीन आलेला कोड पाठवलाय ना? पाठवलाय ना? ओके, ठीक ठीक. चल, नाही तेवढंच विचारायला केलं. चल, अजून बघून घ्या कोणत्या ग्रुप वरती राहिलाय का. चल, ठीक आहे ठीक आहे. चल, मला वाटतं सुरू करूया. कारण 4:15 झाले. अच्छा, तुम्ही त्याच्यावरती मनीषा. हो, पडदा ना. अंधार येत असेल. लावा पडदा.
Good afternoon. I, Dr. Sriram Doshi, Secretary GPA Pune, welcomes you all for today's lecture. It will be given by well-known orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Rushikesh Badwe sir. His subject is soft tissue injuries. Welcome, sir. Now I request GPA President, Dr. Rupa Agarwal.
Thank you, sir. Welcome all the friends for today's Friday study circle session. I apologize for a little delay because of the technical issue. Zoomचा सर्व्हर डाऊन झाल्यामुळे ती लिंक अचानकपणे निष्क्रिय झाली होती आणि त्यामुळे थोडासा आपल्याला उशीर झाला. बट विदाउट एनी फर्दर डिले आपल्या क्लिनिकमध्ये नेहमीच फेस करणाऱ्या सॉफ्ट टिश्यू इंजुरीज बद्दल आपले स्पीकर आजचे ऑर्थोपेडिक सर्जन डॉक्टर ऋषिकेश बडवे आपल्या बरोबर आहेत. Who's going to take this talk? So I request Secretary Doshi sir to introduce our convener.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I introduce today's convener, Dr. Ejad Mania. He had done DHMS from Ahmednagar Homeopathic Medical College. He had done MD from DKMM Homeopathy Medical College. He had done PGDEMS from Ruby Hall Clinic. 24 years experience as a family physician in Maniar Clinic, Camp Pune. Work as HOD department of Ruby Hall Clinic. Attachment to the Inamdar Multi-Specialty Hospital. Now I hand over charge to Dr. Ejad Mania.
Mania sir. I think message दिलेला. Maniar sir. Sir join होईपर्यंत.
Now I introduce today's speaker, Badwe sir. Currently practicing orthopedic surgeon in Pune since 1998. Diploma in Orthopedic Mumbai 1995. MBBS Amravati 1992. Area of interest fracture flexation bone metabolism. Now I hand over charge to Dr. Rushikesh Badwe sir.
Good evening to all of the GPA members and big thank you to the GPA organizing committee, scientific committee, Secretary Dr. Shriram Joshi sir, and President Dr. Mrs. Rupa Agarwal madam. So today's topic, as has been declared, is sports. Soft tissue injuries, but that I would like to modify it to a heading of soft tissue conditions in orthopedics, because if we limit ourselves to injuries, it will be not that interesting. And as you know, that orthopedic means we deal in mostly in bones, joints, and uh, musculoskeletal system. So what does soft tissue has to do in orthopedics? Well, where the muscles, tendons, and the joint capsule, which are in close proximity to the bone or joints, and the conditions which often lead to pain through these soft tissue attachments to the bone are quite interesting. Not only interesting, they pose a big challenge in diagnosis, as well as they can be frustrating as far as the management is. Quickly moving to the format, uh, I would like to start from the neck region and going downwards to the lower extremity. We will be discussing mainly the pathogenesis of all these conditions, because the treatment pattern will definitely depend on the pathogenesis, and I will lay more importance to the pathogenesis of all these conditions and considering and relative anatomy, which is important in knowing the pathogenesis of all this. So the first thing is very commonly seen in our practice, fibromyalgia pertains to a term where all the back muscles, starting from the occiput, that is the neck, to the lower back, all these back muscles, when they undergo inflammation and the fascia covering them undergoes inflammation, this term is known as fibromyalgia. That is not a strict definition, it is quite flexible definition. But why does this occur, and what are the reasons, and how do we treat fibromyalgia? It's a very common condition in young ladies and young individuals up to the age of, say, 45, starting from age of 30, especially postpartum women. And what happens is, all the supporting muscles which have to act against gravity all their life to maintain the body balance, because we don't do any activity in our life by bending backwards. Everything is done bending forwards. And a person who bends forward will not fall forwards, because it is supported by the back muscles of the spine, that is starting from the neck to the scapular region to the lower back region. So these muscles are specifically anti-gravity muscles, and they have to work against gravity all their life. And naturally, they are prone to undergo fatigue after a certain period of time. How does the fatigue set in? Well, when the blood supply to these huge muscles which support the whole body gets compromised, they start paining. And the common causes are anemia. They can get involved in inflammation due to other conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, or just idiopathic, means there is no known cause. Or commonly nowadays we check vitamin D and B12 very frequently, and when these deficiencies are corrected, they usually get these patients get all right with correction of the vitamin deficiencies. So anemia, vitamin deficiencies, overexertion, mental stress are the main causes of pain in fibromyalgia of the anti-gravity muscles of the back. Curiously, a lot of research has been done over this fibromyalgia, and it pertains various names like non-articular rheumatism or bursitis. One such typical bursa. Bursa is a structure which helps in lubrication of the joint. Joint per se has lubrication in form of synovial fluid, but one particular joint in the upper back area is the scapulothoracic articulation. The scapula bone will rotate over the thoracic cavity, and to facilitate this smooth movement, there is a large bursa between the scapula and the chest wall. So if this bursa gets inflamed, it will also mimic fibromyalgia. So that is one another condition, soft tissue condition, which one should keep in mind while treating upper backache people. Also, fibromyalgia will be a part of cervical degeneration as well. In cervical degeneration, what happens is the disc space will get reduced and the nerves exiting from the cervical spine, supplying to the upper back and the upper extremities. If they are under pressure or if they undergo inflammation, the areas to which they supply will experience pain or tingling or numbness or weakness as well. So one should be able to differentiate between cervical radiculopathy and fibromyalgia. In cervical radiculopathy, usually the nerve-related symptoms like paresthesia, tingling, numbness, burning will be more, whereas in pure fibromyalgia, the pain is a major factor. Another thing which can lead to fibromyalgia is the commonest thing is the diabetes mellitus, wherein the blood circulation to the whole all tissues of the body is slow, the oxygenation is poor, and therefore the because of lack of supply of sugar to each and every cell properly, the muscles will receive less sugar, less oxygen, and therefore it can lead to pain in the upper back muscles. So this is one interesting and actually very difficult to treat, because patient will keep on moving to one clinician to the other, and at times the relief is not very quick or easy, or even if even if the patient experiences relief, the recurrence is very high because the underlying pathology is not diagnosed very correctly at times. And so coming to the treatment part of such fibromyalgia condition is investigating the patient properly. X-ray, more than X-ray, I would like to stress upon blood investigations here, because blood investigations will let us know about anemia or any other pathology like diabetes or vitamin deficiency, and then we can treat them accordingly. Physiotherapy forms a very big part of the treatment here, in form of interferential therapy, shortwave diathermy. Nowadays, shortwave diathermy is less preferred, but then it definitely helps. How to increase the basic issue, as you must have understood, is lack of oxygenation to the large anti-gravity muscles lead to muscle pain or fibromyalgia. How to increase the blood supply is the whole crux. Now, in form of physiotherapy, and apart from non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, at times steroidal drugs, muscle relaxants, and all these routine treatment, most important is exercises. So if we do the back extension exercises or neck and scapular exercises and tell the importance of these exercises to the patient, I'm sure the patient will have less episodes of pain in his coming life. So lifestyle modification and exercises is a very important thing in treating fibromyalgia. And I usually prefer to teach the exercises myself, because that stresses the importance. If someone else tries to teach them, or some of your subordinate or somebody else, then they feel that exercise is of less importance. Even while writing the prescription, do make a habit that first is exercise and then try to give your drugs or try to explain other things. So always at the top should be exercise therapy in treating fibromyalgia. Now, after having covered this, let us go to the upper extremity. I'm deliberately omitting shoulder from this, because to understand shoulder pathologies and rotator cuff tears and all, it's a different topic altogether. So I will be going down to the elbow. Now, as the term elbow comes, the common conditions which come to mind is tennis elbow and golfer's elbow. What do we mean by tennis elbow? So if we see the forearm muscles, I'll try to draw, but I'll हे मोठं करते ना. या असंच दाखवतंय.
मला त्यांना नाही इकडे
हे मोठं
दिसेल.
करा.
अच्छा
मला
मग
इकडे हे जाऊ दे black करून. Yes. So if you can see, right? So this is the medial epicondyle, and that is the lateral epicondyle, right? So now I'm going to put my hand over the bones. Now, if you can see the part I'm grasping, this part are the extensors, and the bulky part here, which you can see, are the flexors. Now the flexors will start from the medial epicondyle and go to the palm, and thereby help in grasping the fist. All actions we do with power is by closing the fist and not by opening the fist. So naturally, the nature has made a provision to give more strength and more bulk to the flexors rather than the weak extensors. Look at the thin strip, right? So this is the thin strip of muscle which starts from lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and this starts from the medial epicondyle of the humerus. So flexors are the main muscles, extensor are just restoring muscles. बंद झालेली परत उघडली पाहिजे म्हणून. That is the function of extensors. Now imagine a hand lying in this position. This is the maximum length where the extensors, which the extensors can have. Now, if repeatedly some action is done in this position, the origin of 12 extensor muscles from the lateral epicondyle of humerus, it undergoes repetitive microtrauma, what we call as. And that microtrauma, the body tries to heal by sending blood supply, but our activities do continue, like driving a scooter, lifting buckets, or handling a mobile, everything whatever we do in life. So it is done in this pronated position wherein the extensor are put in action. This microtrauma leading to increase in blood supply of the extensor origin, common extensor origin, leads to swelling because our activities continue, and that swelling or that inflammation will lead to a painful condition called as tennis elbow. How to diagnose it? There is a point tenderness over the lateral epicondyle. The moment you touch it, at times the patient won't allow you to touch it. It is so tender and it is so painful. So that is one classical sign. Another sign is you ask the patient to straighten his elbow, put his wrist in complete flexion in pronation, and ask him to dorsiflex it against resistance. He won't be able to do that because this action is of the extensor muscles, right? So if you ask him to do this, it will be extremely painful here. So he is moving the wrist, but the pain is at the elbow. So these are traditionally called as Mealy's sign, Millian's signs, and the Cosen's sign, etc. So basically, these signs demonstrate the stretch over the common extensor origin. And the reason I told you, it is a repetitive microtrauma which causes these conditions. Now, coming to the treatment part of tennis elbow, similarly, we'll just finish it off. Similarly, rarely, means I would say 10:1 is the ratio. If you see 10 patients of tennis elbow, you will, or maybe 20 patients of tennis elbow, you'll see one patient of golfer's elbow or the medial epicondylitis. Same thing happens. The common flexor origin undergoes microtrauma, or at times the history is very classical. The patient has undergone trauma to this medial side once or twice in say 6 months or 3 months time, and that leads to pain in the medial epicondyle. So the treatment essentially is in form of gradual stretching of these muscles. That is, you have to ask them to gradually flex and extend, flex and extend. Also push it against wall and try to contract these muscles. As you can see, now I am contracting without resistance. Saw that? So these are the few tricks which help to strengthen the common extensor origin. Also, one can use a belt, but the belt is not supposed to be wrapped over the tender point, because the tender point is nothing but the origin. It doesn't move per se. It has a very micro motion. What moves and what gives the strength to the wrist is the extensor group of muscles where you have to tie the band. Can you see my fingers? That is where the belt should be tied. So it is around 2 to 3 fingers below the lateral epicondyle. So these are initial part of treatment, of course, added with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, at times steroid. The best treatment, according to me, for tennis elbow still is local hydrocortisone with anesthetic injection. lignocaine 2%, 1 cc, and 1 cc of Kenacort or 1 cc of hydrocortisone acetate. So that given locally will gives a good relief. At times the patient do not complain ever in their life after one shot of steroid, or they may require a top up say after 1 month or 6 weeks or maybe 3 months. In the career of 25 years of my practice, I have heard only one famous personality undergoing operation for tennis elbow, and that is Sachin Tendulkar. And 2 operations I have seen my bosses doing. What does the surgery do is you have to take a small incision over the lateral epicondyle and try to erase the common extensor origin from its original site and reattach it to or let it reattach naturally or let it heal naturally at a different site which is not inflamed. So that finishes our tennis elbow. Coming down to the wrist. Now wrist also has an interesting condition which we say very oftenly, that is de Quervain's tenosynovitis. De Quervain's goes by the French scientist name who discovered this. Now what does de Quervain's tenosynovitis mean is, as one can understand, out of the 5 digits we have, thumb plays a major role in the function of hand. 70% of the function is by thumb. Only 4 digits will do a very little function of grasping, picking or anything else. Whereas the thumb will always be instrumental in doing all the functions of hand. That is why thumb has a special supply of muscles acting on it, different muscles acting on it, unlike the other 4 digits. So essentially the thumb has 3 extensor tendons. One is abductor, which ends here at the base of thumb, right here. The second is extensor pollicis brevis. This is called as abductor pollicis longus, this tendon. The one which reaches here is extensor pollicis brevis. And the third one, which crosses from here and goes to the distal, goes to the interphalangeal joint, is extensor pollicis longus. Now, what happens in de Quervain's? It is the first compartment of the wrist. So these 2 tendons jointly come from the forearm, get converted into tendon like this. This you can see the, I hope you can understand the threads here. These are the extensor tendons. Similarly, the thumb will have 2 tendons which cross the wrist at this radial styloid. Okay. So once it crosses the radial styloid, abductor will get attached at the base of thumb and extensor pollicis brevis will travel till here. So these 2 are flush with the radial styloid here, right? And to prevent a bowstring effect when the thumb is moving, that it should not, the tendon should not get lifted up from the bone or lifted up from the hand, there is a tunnel or a fibrous sheath or a covering which holds the tendons together at that place, right? Now, because of overuse or because of some previous trauma like fracture lower end radius or many other reasons like patients on anti-epileptics or immediately after pregnancy. Pregnancy, what it does is it retains salt and water, which is washed out after the delivery, but at certain places the salt and water remains and it remains in form of swelling. So in these conditions, what happens is these tendons will have a resistance while they are moving. That resistance is caused by thickening of the tunnel through which they pass, or swelling of the tunnel, or inflammation of the tunnel, or fibrosis of the tunnel. All these conditions will lead to restriction of the movement of these 2 tendons. How to diagnose it? The classical complaint will be pain at the wrist, tenderness over the radial styloid. I hope you can appreciate. Tenderness over the radial styloid, this point, base of thumb, and all other movements of wrist except one will be painful. If there is any other pathology apart from de Quervain's synovitis, tenosynovitis, other movements will also be painful, but in de Quervain's, palmar flexion, painless, dorsiflexion, painless, radial deviation will be painless. But as soon as you stretch this, got that? You stretch this, it is extremely painful. Patient will literally jump up, right? So that is the pathognomonic sign of de Quervain stenosynovitis. Radial ulnar deviation leading to stretching of these two tendons will lead to excruciating pain. Now, many things have been tried to treat de Quervain's, right from rest, physiotherapy, plasters even, local steroid injection, everything has been tried. Especially in young people where they do not like to undergo any procedure or anything, they do opt for non-operative treatment and all other forms of therapies like medicines, physiotherapy, everything. But again, according to me and in my experience, it's a procedure of only 5 minutes. You have to give a local anesthesia here, open up the sheath, and that's it. You just have to take an incision which will be closed by hardly 2 or 3 stitches, and you come across that sheath and you just open up that sheath, free those tendons, and the patient will never ever in life complain of any pain due to this condition. So that is de Quervain synovitis. Now, another very interesting and very common condition in hand is trigger finger. So we have dealt with the extensor part, that is the tennis elbow, de Quervain's, all these are extensor abductor conditions. Now trigger finger is pertaining to the flexor muscle, flexor tendons of the fingers. What happens here is when we flex the finger, the flexors are acting, and when we restore it, the extensor or the back tendons are acting. As I have told you, the flexors are main muscles of the hand, and they have much more power than the extensor. Extensor are just restoring muscles. When the flexor muscles cross the wrist, as you can see here, these threads, when they cross the wrist, from one point they spread towards the palm to reach all the digits, right? All the digits. So in a V-shaped fashion, they will be spreading towards the digits. While they are spreading through the hand and through the finger per se, they are covered at places with two types of pulleys. Pulleys, or you can say tunnels. One tunnel is annular and the another one is cruciate. So there are 4 type of annular tunnels and 3 type of cruciate tunnels. So especially at this point, the annular tunnel, if it thickens and the movement of the flexor tendon gets restricted, it will slowly give rise to what a condition called as trigger finger. Now, why trigger finger? What happens is the thread-like flexor tendon undergoes change, and there is a nodular swelling which occurs inside the tendon. Okay, so once that nodular swelling occurs, it has to pass, whenever we are moving the fingers, that nodular swelling has to pass through the tunnel and come back again. For example, this, I'll show this finger. Now this, it is coming towards the wrist, that swelling, right? Once it comes towards the wrist, suppose the tunnel is here and now the nodular swelling is here. Now once it comes towards the wrist, while extending, it has to pass through this way. But the extensor, as you know, are weak. So what happens is it gets obstructed. The extensors do not have that much of strength as to make them pass forcefully through the tunnel. So it gets stuck up here, like a trigger of a gun, right? So this is the action where the trigger will be stuck. So what happens is the pulley is here, the nodular swelling is here. Now it will come easily through the tunnel if we flex, because flexors are strong. While restoring the position of the finger, it has to pass, the swelling has to pass through the tunnel, and that is where it gets stuck, and the patient will typically complain of 1, pain, 2, obstruction of movement, that is difficulty in moving, and he will also try to make it straight with the other hand using the force of the other hand, and there will be a tuck like sound, and he will tell you that it clicks when I try to make the finger straight. Now, what are the causes of trigger finger? Usually it is found in diabetics, Usually it is found in heavy manual laborers. Usually it is found in after 50 age group, and those people who do fine work with hand. So all varieties of patients can be seen, but the history taking is important as far as the occupation is concerned. And also it is found that it is bilaterally symmetrical. Most commonly affected is trigger finger of the ring one, the fourth digit, ring finger. So, and the next common is thumb. Probably they have a competition which one is common, but in my opinion, the ring finger is the commonest. Thumb is the second in follow, trigger thumb. Pathogenesis is the same. Congenital trigger thumb is another curious condition where newborn baby will have thumbs in this position. So he will not be able to extend, he or she will not be able to extend at all. And the anxious parents will come that आमच्या मुलाचे अंगठे वाकडे आहे. But then that is very easily treatable. Unfortunately, you have to give general anesthesia here, whereas in adults, this procedure can be done under local anesthesia. All you have to do is just instill 2 ml of local anesthesia over the swelling and release the pulley which is causing obstruction to the swelling. Before that, what can be tried is again non-steroidal drugs, steroids, local massage, and control of the other conditions like diabetes, or if he's on epileptic drugs like phenytoin especially. Now there are so many drugs available. In initial days, phenytoin sodium was the mainstay of epilepsy, mainstay treatment of epilepsy. So you have to stop phenytoin and put him on some other drugs. So all those things. So that leads to that completes our trigger finger part. Dicker once is over, and now ganglion. Now actually ganglion can occur anywhere in the body. Basically, what is ganglion? Ganglion is outpouching of the synovial fluid, and synovial fluid can be anywhere where there is movement. So if I want to make it more clear, movement is at the joints, movement is also at the tendons, right? So whatever moves will have lubrication with it, and the tendon also is covered by a thin film of lubrication, and which is contained in a thin film that is called as tenosynovium. Or the joint is covered by what we call as synovial cover, into which there is a fluid. Now some weakness, some trauma, or some repetitive activity will lead to weakness in the synovial covering, whether it is tendon or whether it is joint. And through that weakness, it doesn't get torn, but it becomes weak. And because of that weakness, or through that weakness, the synovial fluid outpouches in form of a swelling, which at times on pressing will be reduced, and this is called as ganglion. So basically it is mucinous degeneration of the synovial fluid, or it is the outpouching of the synovial fluid. Ganglion is very frustrating at times for treating, because no matter whatever you do, the patient will always be unhappy because of the recurrence rate. So traditionally, whatever is given in textbook, almost 100 types of treatments have been documented to treat a ganglion. But what have stood the test of time are: one, local steroid injection with hyaluronic acid or Hylase, what we call, that dissolves the mucinous substance and that dissolves the fluid inside and causes fibrosis and thereby heals the ganglion. With injection, there is almost 50% recurrence. Second is, under local anesthesia, you just excise the ganglion and that's it. And you try to tie the walls in an open fashion rather than close it as they were in the first place. So that will prevent the recurrence. But still, with surgery also, there is around 30 to 40% recurrence documented in the literature. So now what is the best treatment? If 50% recurrence is there with injection and 50% recurrence is there with surgery, ganglion is never a malignant condition. once you rule out all other things like giant cell tumor or synovial cell tumor, ganglion is a benign condition which never harms the body, which never causes any damage to the joint or the associated structure. So willful neglect or not doing anything or masterly inactivity is or should be the treatment of ganglion, and for that the physician has to have a very patient attitude, and howsoever the patient insists that do this or do that, you should be trying to tell him or her to just be patient and wait for the resolution of the ganglion by nature. Typical indications of surgery or treatment in ganglion are sudden increase in size or continuous pain or continuous concern about that swelling in mind of patient. At that times, definitely you have to go ahead and excise the ganglion and send it for histopathology. Commonest sites of ganglion are the dorsal side of the wrist. That is the commonest site. Less common is again wrist, but on the volar side, at times near the radial artery. Now, when it is on the dorsum of the wrist, one has to be sure whether it is from the extensor tendon or the wrist joint per se, right? So, if it moves with the finger movement, that means it is through, it is attached to the tendon. And once you press it, or if you flex the wrist, and if it disappears, that means the fluid is going inside the wrist. So it is coming from the wrist. This is important to know because when we treat surgically, you should be knowing what anatomy you are going to deal with. So these are the two common sites. Dorsum of the wrist is the commonest. Volar aspect of the wrist is the second common. And third common is the foot. Or very rarely you get to see it on the foot, but although you can see it on the foot. So that is about ganglion. And I hope we are having enough time. Yes, we are having. How much minutes? Okay. 15 minutes still. Okay. So these are the common conditions in the upper extremity or soft tissue conditions in the upper extremity. Coming to the lower extremity, common soft tissue conditions. Again, fibromyalgia or lumbosacral strain of the lower back, that is again a different topic. But in fibromyalgia per se, lower back can also get involved, and causes we have already discussed, treatment also we have discussed. Now coming to the hip, hip is typically in childhood, when a pediatric age group patient comes to you with literally crying, with not able to walk, and the history is usually not more than 24 hours. So we are usually scared because of the apprehensive parents and kai jhala baga, suddenly this has gone and he is not walking and what should we be doing? Usually the X-ray is normal, even the lab investigations are normal. This condition is called as transient synovitis of the hip joint, which is a very common condition in children. What happens is usually the child is overactive, playing and jumping all around, and suddenly the hip capsule gets stretched and it leads to an inflammatory process, that is transient synovitis of the hip. So hip pain, inability to walk of a very recent onset in a pediatric age group, you should put your diagnosis as transient hip synovitis before going to other conditions like Perthes disease and all other conditions related to hip. So transient hip synovitis, treatment is usually anti-inflammatory drugs and rest. So in 2 to 3 days time, miraculously the patient gets well and starts jumping again. So that is one. Second is in adults, greater trochanter bursitis. As I told you, the bursa is a structure where it is encased in a film. The synovial fluid is encased in a film, and it is usually found around the large joints, like I mentioned in scapulothoracic area. There are around 13 bursae around the knee joint, and around the hip joint, there is one important bursa at the greater trochanter that can get inflamed suddenly, and typical presentation is acute onset of pain, limp, and on examination, usually in adult patient, if there is a complaint of hip pain, we do think of other conditions like a vascular necrosis or sacroiliitis or radicular pain and every other thing. But how to differentiate it, how to differentiate the greater trochanter bursa is when the patient is turned on the side and when you inspect it, there is usually redness over the greater trochanter bursa, extreme tenderness, and when you try to adduct the lower extremity, it will give a stretch to the bursa and that will be painful. Adduction and internal rotation will cause pain in greater trochanter bursitis. So that is one interesting condition. Second thing, in the hip area, which is commonly seen, which can be classified as a soft tissue condition, is meralgia paresthetica. Now, meralgia paresthetica involves the lateral cutaneous nerve of thigh, and the lateral cutaneous nerve of thigh is just below the anterior superior iliac spine, and it supplies the anterior and lateral part of the thigh. And typically, the patient will complain of pain in that area or numbness in that area, and this numbness and pain is usually of a chronic onset, and the patient may or may not have undergone many investigations for lumbar disc pathologies or hip pathologies and everything. But if you look into the clinical settings and especially the area of distribution of pain, that is exactly over the anterior and lateral area, you have to ask twice, thrice, 4 times whether it is in any other area. The patient will definitely deny it, and if it is meralgia paresthetica, he will have paresthesia, abnormal sensation, burning sensation, and pain in that particular area of the thigh. So meralgia is usually seen in patient. It can occur in anyone, but diabetics are more prone for such a condition, and treatment is usually physiotherapy. And nowadays, with advance in drugs like pregabalin, nortriptyline, and all nerve-related, nerve-soothing, what I would say, all these drugs, what they do, they centrally act over the nerve conduction, and they smoothen out the nerve conduction, and the nerve irritation is thereby stopped. So that is meralgia paresthetica around hip. Then coming to the knee, there are so many conditions which will be affected, which will be seen in the knee. And actually, I was we had a discussion with the scientific committee that whether I should be talking on differential diagnosis of knee pain. If they give me an opportunity, I will be definitely love to do that also. But then today, we'll restrict ourselves only to the soft tissue conditions. So the most common soft tissue condition in pediatric age group is Osgood-Schlatter's disease, or what we call as tibial apophysitis. The tibial tuberosity, everyone knows where it is. Adolescent patient, not a young one, not a very neonatal or infantile. Usually the age group is say 11 to 13 in females and 15 to or maybe 14 to 16 in boys. And they do complain of severe pain in the knee, and the classical sign is again extreme tenderness over the tibial tuberosity. What happens is the boy or the girl is growing very fast, the height is increasing, there are hormonal changes, and tibial tuberosity gets less blood supply as compared to the other cartilage in the knee, because knee is a major growing area. So whole focus of the nutrition is towards the other cartilage to increase the height, and the tibial tuberosity gets lesser blood supply and it undergoes fragmentation, and that leads to inflammation, pain. This is usually self-limiting. Again, as soon as the growth is complete, the patient will never complain of pain. So reassurance is the main part of the treatment. Rest to the part is one of the things, and nutritional supplement like vitamin D, calcium, protein diet, all those things. So tibial apophysitis, what we call, or Osgood-Schlatter's disease. So this is another very important condition which is easily treatable at any level of practice, be it a consultant or a general practitioner level. So one should be aware of that Osgood-Schlatter's disease. Next, in the adult group, common is the bursa around knee can undergo inflammation. So there is a bursa called as infrapatellar bursa, means that will lie exactly below the patella or distal to the patella but proximal to the tibial tuberosity behind the patellar tendon. So infrapatellar bursa will be seen swollen in patients or in people who do their day-to-day activity by putting their knee on the floor, especially homemakers who try to go on sweeping the floors by touching the knees on the ground. So that is usually the common cause of infrapatellar bursa. Trauma can lead to infrapatellar bursa if there is a direct hit while driving a two-wheeler or four-wheeler over that area. That will undergo that trauma will lead to some bleeding inside the infrapatellar bursa, and typically after 1 month of the trauma it will start paining. So all other investigations will be normal, but the patient will have pain. Again, the treatment is just non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, at times steroids, at times physical therapy, and reassurance. Coming slightly upwards is prepatellar bursa. Prepatellar bursa is the bursa between skin and the patella. So if the patella bone is such and the skin, so in between there is a small thin film of fluid that is called as prepatellar bursa. The history is usually of trauma directly over the knee. And after the trauma, again, in the bursa, there is a bleeding. Now, why this swells up? Blood is not a normal substance in any of these bursae or any of the joint. Joint will only and only will have synovial fluid. Whenever blood comes inside the joint due to trauma or any other cause, like bleeding disorders, the joint fluid or the joint synovial lining will try to digest that blood. And in an attempt to do that, it will more and more amounts of synovial fluid will be produced, which will lead to swelling and bursitis. So prepatellar bursa is a very common thing after trauma. Usually you will find friction abrasions over the skin which have healed, and there is a balloon-like palatable swelling, which is definitely not reducing or not increasing on the knee movements because it is outside the knee joint. It is outside the knee joint, below the skin and above the patella. So it is not going to change its size, even though you change the capacity of the knee joint by moving the knee joint. So this is called as prepatellar bursa. Now prepatellar bursa is again, reassurance is very important because in my younger days I have tried aspirating it, giving steroidal injections and doing whatnot. But as the years pass by and you get your experience, reassurance is the main thing. After 3 months, maybe 4 months, maybe 6 months, it resolves on its own. But if the patient is very anxious, what you can do is just excise it directly, because injections and aspirations are going to lead to recurrence. Howsoever time you aspirate it or rather in one case, I remember I had given a steroidal injection and it led to infection. So I would rather avoid a steroid injection inside a prepatellar bursa because it is a very superficial thing. Already there has been a friction abrasion, so there is a break in the skin. So the bacteria have already infiltrated, and there on the top of it you are adding anti-immune substances like steroid. So it can lead to infection very easily. So rather do nothing or directly excise it. That is, it's like all or none thing. So that is prepatellar bursa. Similarly, there is a suprapatellar pouch, and the most interesting part, or a surgeon's what we call as bread and butter, is the popliteal bursa. Popliteal bursa is on the back of the knee. It is outpouching of directly the synovial covering, as I told you in ganglion. Ganglion can occur from tendon or the joint. So it is a ganglion of the knee posteriorly. So it comes out posteriorly and causes a large swelling in the popliteal fossa. Now the differential diagnosis here, one has to be very careful while putting a diagnosis of popliteal bursa, because the vessels lie directly there, the popliteal vessels. So you have to rule out popliteal aneurysm. One, that is a dangerous thing. Before touching a popliteal bursa for anything, you have to make sure that it is not a popliteal aneurysm. Second thing, at times what happens is the popliteal bursa bursts and the whole fluid, synovial fluid, extravasates into the cuff and the cuff swells up. Now, the commonest cause of calf swelling, as we all know, is deep vein thrombosis. Deep vein thrombosis is usually not painful, or if at all there is pain, it is on eliciting the Homan sign or tenderness or pressing the calf. Whereas if the popliteal bursa bursts and the fluid extravasates into the calf, it is very, very painful, because it leads to an inflammatory reaction. Although we have to differentiate it from different deep vein thrombosis, and investigation of choice here is not X-ray or anything. It is color Doppler study or ultrasonography. And plain ultrasonography, instead of plain ultrasonography, I would prefer color Doppler, because it will directly differentiate from deep vein thrombosis and it will give you a diagnosis of popliteal bursa rupture. If the popliteal bursa is not ruptured, it can be treated safely with rest analgesics, because the main pathology is osteoarthritis of the knee rather than anything else. So treating popliteal bursa per se by surgical excision or by giving steroidal injection is just a stopgap arrangement rather than the complete treatment. So the complete treatment remains osteoarthritis, or treatment of osteoarthritis, rather than treating popliteal bursa. Unfortunately, if it bursts, what we do? Then elevation, rest, ice, reassure. It takes a long time, believe me. It takes a much longer time than we imagine to have complete relief from a burst popliteal bursa. Although here the importance of rest is not to be overemphasized. So that is about prepatellar bursa, infrapatellar bursa, tibial apophysitis, popliteal bursa, suprapatellar. So these are the main soft tissue conditions leading to problems around the knee joint. Now coming downwards, again, practically I would say a universal thing, and that should conclude the lecture. Hamstring injury is one of the common things which we come across. So before going to the heel, I would just make a passing note of hamstring injury. In sports person, you must have seen on the televisions, recently Rohit Sharma has undergone a hamstring injury. Whether it is a political one or that's a different story. But then hamstring is a very common injury. Coming to the heel will present, almost all human beings will have heel pain sometime or the other in their life. So it can be on the plantar side, that is called as plantar fasciitis. These are, I'm talking, see, there are many causes of heel pain, right from diabetic neuropathy, hypothyroidism, or trauma, or many other things. But the common things which we encounter are plantar fasciitis, one, and second is the pain on the back side of the heel, that is where the tendo achilis is inserted over the calcaneal bone. So the tendo achilis, when it gets inserted on the calcaneal bone, on the anterior aspect, that is between the calcaneal bone and the tendon, there is a bursa that is called as retrocalcaneal bursa. And between the skin and the tendo achilis, there is another bursa that is called as tendo achilis bursa. Both these bursae can get inflamed and lead to heel pain. Why this occurs is because tendo achilis is a structure which pulls the heel up when we are walking. And imagine our gait. When we are stationary, we put the first say right foot first. At that time, our body doesn't get propelled forward. But the moment we pull our heel like that, the tendo achilis pulls the heel and the body is propelled forward. So imagine the strength which the gastrosoleus has and tendoachelis exerts over the heel. So to facilitate a smooth movement there are these two bursae given. One is between the skin and the tendon, and the another is between the tendon and the bone. So both these bursae can undergo inflammation, and the bone growth can be there at in the retrocalcaneal area. Now, why this bone growth occurs, I will tell you. Also on the plantar side, there is usually the pain is very excruciating in the morning hours when the first time the patient lands on the ground. And here also, when the X-ray is asked for, you can see there is a spur, or the radiologist will report it as calcaneal spur. And there is a common belief in everybody's mind that this spur is the cause of all trouble. So why not excise it? Actually speaking, the spur is not the cause of trouble. People will always say, माझं हाड वाढलं, टाचेचं हाड वाढलं, टाचेचं हाड वाढल्यामुळे दुखतंय. But that is not the cause of pain, believe me. Spur is only an arrangement done by the body to increase the strength of the heel, nothing else. This goes by the Wolff's law, WOLFF', Wolff's law. What does the Wolff's law say? Is stress will lead to strength. So you are putting stress on the heel all your life, every time you walk. So the heel feels that it needs more and more strength, and how it is going to gain strength is by increase in the bone size. So that is how a calcaneal spur develops. Now the problem is, why pain? The problem is the plantar fascia, a thick structure which starts from the base of heel and goes to every digit to maintain the spring-like action of the foot while we are walking, running, jumping, and putting stress over the foot. This plantar fascia, where it is attached to the bone, again it undergoes repetitive microtrauma, as we have seen in tennis elbow, and that leads to inflammation. Why does the history is very typical. You need not, means you can directly ask a leading question. If the patient says टाच दुखतीये, the first question should be, सकाळी झोपेतनं उठल्यावर पहिलं पाऊल टेकवताना टाच दुखते का? The answer will be affirmative. Yes. That is the point where I have maximum pain. Why this happens? Because during the night hours, both the feet are in this plantar flexed fashion. The moment you stretch it, they are going to have pain. Also, during the night hours, the circulation in the foot is very less. There is no need of circulation there. So all the day you have been you are walking all the day, putting stress on the feet, and pain producing substances are getting accumulated there. Because there is less washing away of the painful substances during the night hours, they get accumulated there. And once you put the foot first step on the ground, it causes pain. And as you move on, with increase in the circulation, blood circulation, the pain producing substances are washed away, and then the patient starts feeling better. So this is pathognomonic sign of plantar fasciitis, that first feet down, excruciating pain. And in the treatment part, let us cover the treatment part of plantar fasciitis first, because it is very interesting, and the heel pain later, or the tendoachelis pain later. Treatment of plantar fasciitis essentially is stretching exercises, because nobody is going to stop walking. You are going to put your all weight. You have been putting your weight, and you will be putting your body weight while you walk. So doing exactly the opposite thing, that is stretching the heel or stretching the plantar fascia, is the mainstay of the treatment. And that you have to make sure that the patients will follow that. Otherwise, there is no point in giving whatsoever amount of drugs or anything. So stretching exercise remains the first thing. Second is footwear change. Now, what has happened is, we have continued our practice of not using footwear when we are indoors. This was a traditional in India to have saravleल्या zamini. So those floors were very soft, and people could easily do away without any footwear. But now we have changed that. We have changed the floor. the floors have become hard, and we have continued the practice of not wearing a footwear on the hard floor. So indoor footwear is a must, because most of the time the plantar fasciitis patient are ladies and they are homemakers. So making it sure that they wear soft heel indoor footwear uh, will do the trick most of the time. So first is stretching exercise, second is footwear, third is hot fomentation, application of ointments, and then comes the role of drugs and everything else. Local steroid injections, yes, do help, and it is found that if the plantar fascia ruptures from the attachment of heel, the patient has dramatic pain relief. But that doesn't mean that you should rupture the plantar fascia, because that will lead to other problems like flat foot and everything. So that is the treatment of plantar fascia: stretching exercises, soft heel footwear, hot fomentation, ointments, and drugs. As far as the tendo achilis is concerned, it's a complex issue, and the treatment is using high heel footwear, because if this is the plantigrade position, how could I demonstrate that? 90 degrees is the plantigrade position. See this way. This is the plantigrade position, and if it is stretched further, see, this is the 90 degree, and if it's stretched further, this tendo achilis is going to get hurt. So keeping it like this while walking is going to help. So just a broad and high heel footwear is very important in treating tendo achilis. That should be also of soft heel. Nowadays, the shoe companies and the footwear companies have come up with beautiful products. Skechers is one of the company which has come up with memory foams. Crocs is company which has come up with light ride rubber. So you can suggest all of those things, but do not underestimate the role of exercises. Now stretching, this is an important point. Stretching is very helpful in plantar fasciitis, but it will be detrimental if the pain is on the tendo achilis side. So you have to be sure which side you are treating. If it is on the tendo achilis side, you have to strengthen the calf muscles, and the exercise therapy is totally different from that of plantar fasciitis. But stretching is extremely helpful in plantar fasciitis. So these are the few things I remember. Now, just a passing mention, all these bursae, all these tendons, all these sudden joint swelling, do remember a condition called as gout. Now, we can cover that sometime else in say arthritis conditions, but all the issues will be involved where the uric acid suddenly rises and gets crystallized very commonly in the first metatarsophalangeal joint, but also commonly in all the sites where I have mentioned, in large joints. Upper extremity, yes, very rarely, but then that too happens. And lower extremity, yes, in plantar area, on the retrocalcaneal side, and in the first metatarsophalangeal joint, also the metatarsal joints. Anywhere it can suddenly aggravate the condition, and you have to keep it in mind. So checking just uric acid levels do help. And a word of caution about checking uric acid level: before you use Goutonil or Xyloric, make sure that the blood sample is given to the lab before you start the drugs, so that false negative results are ruled out. So that should be my concluding condition. All soft tissues. There is a famous joke about soft tissues and orthopedics, that once orthopedician was asked the definition of heart. So the answer was, sir, it is an organ which pumps antibiotics to the bones. So that is how we used to look at other soft tissues when we were students. But then with increasing experience and these related soft tissues, we have come to this stage as to treat them very effectively. And I hope this lecture will bring some change and some insight in treating your day-to-day patients of pain. with these very common conditions, right? So I thank you all once again. Thank you, thanks to the scientific committee. Thanks to the president and secretary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful lecture. Dr. Aziz is there in the participant. If host, Mr. Can you take him in as panelist, please? Dr. Aziz is, yes, there are few questions actually. Till then, I'll start with the questions, sir. Yeah, त्यांना आताच घेतलं नाहीये. Carpal tunnel syndrome बद्दलचा एक प्रश्न आहे.
Okay, carpal tunnel is entrapment of the median nerve in the carpal tunnel. Carpal tunnel is a tunnel formed between the wrist bones and a fascia over it, and the median nerve gets entrapped into it. Usually it is found post pregnancy or post degeneration, and again in patients on anti-epileptic drugs. And the most effective treatment is release of the carpal tunnel. The signs of carpal tunnel syndrome are typically numbness in thumb, index, middle, and radial half of the ring finger. So 1, 2, 3.5 fingers. These are supplied by the median nerve, which will start getting numb. Also, all the 5 muscles of the thinner eminence are supplied by median nerve. So there will be wasting, but that is a late sign. If you find wasting in thinner muscles, means you have a very bad carpal tunnel syndrome. There is weakness in the pinch. So this pinch will get weak in carpal tunnel syndrome. And the treatment, as I said, is diagnosis is the closest diagnosis, other diagnosis is radiculopathy. So if the C6 root is C6 root is entrapped here in the cervical spine, it can mimic like a carpal tunnel syndrome. But then EMG NCV study will definitely help us to differentiate between a carpal tunnel and radicular pain.
Some light on ultrasound therapy.
Slides are not seen. I'm sorry about that. This is a more of a practically oriented lecture, and reading these conditions through slides would have been really not that helpful. So I have deferred from making any slides.
Ultrasound therapy.
Yeah, ultrasound therapy will produce good results, and that I have mentioned that in tennis elbow or plantar fasciitis, at times what happens is ultrasonic therapy will aggravate the condition, because in an already inflamed thing, if you are giving high frequency energy to that area which is already inflamed, it can cause aggravation in there. You have to stop. So the first sitting is important here, right? The first sitting, if it alleviates the pain for at least 15-20 minutes, then you can go ahead with further thing.
Treatment of
restless leg syndrome. Now this is a very frustrating condition, and restless leg syndrome, to have a diagnosis of restless leg syndrome itself it is a diagnosis of exclusion. When all other things are normal, when all other investigations are normal, and still having pain in both the legs, that is called as restless leg syndrome. Treatment can be, I mean, anything under the sun. Anything can be tried, any pathy can be tried. Whatever suits the patient can be tried. Drugs can be tried, physiotherapy can be tried, and at times antipsychotic drugs are given. So restless leg syndrome is a very tough condition to treat.
Importance of ice and hot treatment or plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, this is called as contrast bath. By doing this, what we do actually is we try to deceive perception of pain. What the ointments and what hot treatment is more important in plantar fasciitis, because it will wash away, it will increase the blood supply there, and it will wash away the pain producing substances, So hot fomentation is more important in plantar fasciitis according to me. But contrast bath, how does it help is 10 minutes of hot and 2 minutes of cold. By that, the pain perception per se is through the nerves, right? So if the nerves catch the first hot sensation and the cold sensation, you are actually confusing the brain. What is going on there? And the pain is forgotten. That is how the contrast bath helps. Finally, the perception of pain is in the brain. Painful part is the heel. So if you give the input, which is a nociception in case of plantar fasciitis, which is of pain in plantar fasciitis, instead of that, if you give some confusing picture there, it does help.
Just soft chappal is enough or need for specially customized shoes for
Yeah,
footwear?
customized shoes is the in thing now, and customized shoes are more helpful in flat feet patients. Soft heel chappals should be sufficient as far as plantar fasciitis is concerned. But for flat foot, there is a need of undergoing a foot scan, which is a 1 minute investigation. You have to stand on a metal plate, and there is a graph or there is a direct pictorial presentation how your foot is bearing weight when you are standing, and according to that, your insole is designed. So that is called as the customized insole or customized shoe. So that helps more in other conditions, but for pure plantar fasciitis, soft chappal is a better alternative.
Do
Soft
we
heel.
have this kind of resources in Pune?
Yeah,
to
definitely.
design
I
it?
myself use a customized insole.
So next question, what should be the management of hemarthrosis in 18-year-old patient? How safe it can be managed conservatively?
Now that depends on the cause of hemarthrosis. If it is because of trauma, you should rule out what are the what internal damage has occurred. But if it is because of some bleeding disorder, as I can see the age of patient is 18, then you have to go accordingly.
Can we get Reynolds syndrome in severe carpal tunnel syndrome?
No, Raynaud's is definitely different. It is a vasculitis thing, and Raynaud's will present totally in a different way. The fingertips will start having pain, they will change their color, and there will be excruciating pain. In carpal tunnel, there is no excruciating pain. In fact, there is abnormal sensation. That is, paresthesia is more predominant in carpal tunnel.
Extreme carpal tunnel मध्ये
No,
पण
because
हे
carpal
नाही.
tunnel is essentially pressure over the median nerve. In carpal tunnel, already the hand is the most evolved organ on this earth, considering all the animals. So hand has been supplied with two blood vessels already. One is on the ulnar side, one is on the radial side. It does not, both of them go eccentrically, not through the center. The median nerve goes through the center. So there are separate tunnels for the separate tunnel, that is the Guyon's canal for the ulnar artery. Even the radial artery has a different path. So it is not likely that these arteries will get entrapped in carpal tunnel. So carpal tunnel essentially will give pressure on the nerve and not blood vessels. Raynaud's is related to blood vessels.
Recurrent muscle
Or
spasm,
tetany, okay.
tetany, yeah.
Recurrent muscle spasm or tetany is a different condition. It is more better treated by physicians because it is due to sudden calcium deficiency, and it can lead to spasm, carpopedal spasm. This way. That is how it will present. And IV calcium gluconate is the treatment. Post-reactive infusion.
Yes. And what is the pathology when it appears suspected?
Please throw light on writer's cramp.
Yeah.
Sanjay Wagh sir
Oh, I'll find out. Okay.
Okay, some light on writer's cramp. So writer's cramp is a condition which again is not detected on any investigation. It is only detected on history. And it is more of a psychosomatic condition where the patient is tired of writing. And the patient starts writing properly, and after say writing 1 or 2 lines, the hand muscles go into spasm and the handwriting change, and practically he or she is not able to write. And I usually resort to alternative form of treatment rather than modern medicine.
What is the pathology when it is?
So post-operative reactive effusion. So even if we do minimal damage to the knee by doing arthroscopy, say, so that is going to irritate, howsoever less morbid we say, it is going to irritate the synovium. And in procedures like arthroscopy, it should disappear within 3 weeks maximum. But in major surgeries like let us go to an extreme of fracture of the intra-articular area of knee or femur. So in those extreme conditions, the reactive effusion will take a long time to heal, and physiotherapy is the right answer to it. Early mobilization is the right answer to it. Knee replacement. Now, in knee replacement also there can be reactive effusion, but with cold therapy and other exercise form, it settles within say 15 days to 3 weeks time. Post-operative.
Yes. Which type of bed, cotton or foam, should we advise for chronic low back patients?
This is a personal choice, and I usually I advise a firm bed. Simple cotton bed is a better option rather than the sofa sets which you see in 5 stars or the beds which you see in high profile hotels, where once you sit you practically sink down in the sofa. That doesn't offer any support to your skeleton, so that can lead to trouble. So whatever you are using should be having some counter action for your weight.
Just Deepali Mure want to ask something. I will try to unmute her. Till then, he has some question. Oh, yes. Deepali, can you unmute yourself and try speaking?
Could you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, sir, thank you very much for your really helpful lecture and guidance. Sir, it's about my son. He is 11 years and 10 months old, and he is into athletics since last 3 to 4 years. So he used to practice for 3 and 3.5 hours per day on a synthetic track on Sanus ground. But since lockdown period, he used to practice on either a tar road or a concrete road at Talzai or at race course like that. So now he has been diagnosed with Osgood-Schlatter syndrome. So since last 3 weeks, he is absolutely on rest.
Yes.
And X-ray is showing, as you explained, the X-ray is showing fragmentation on the right tibial tuberosity.
Yes.
So my question is, why it must have happened to him, and for how long he should take the rest, and what precautions should he take की अशा परत काही स्पोर्ट्स इंजुरी किंवा ओव्हर यूज इंजुरीज त्याला होऊ नये. And he's already taking calcium, a good protein diet, and vitamin D.
Yeah.
And so that's it.
So basically, Kyala's Kawawa is just a part of luck, and it has nothing to do whether he practices on turf, whether he practices on grass or a tar road.
Okay.
This is related to differential growth, right? So what do we mean by differential growth is his height is increasing and more energy is spent on increase of height rather than growth of that tibial tuberosity, which is not so important structure. That is why it has undergone fragmentation and pain. It is self-limiting. Believe me, it is self-limiting. Nothing is to be done. At the most, what we can do is just put him in a brace so that movements in the knee doesn't occur. But that will again lead to stiffness. So I would rather suggest to give complete rest rather than pursuing. He must be an enthusiastic sports person, because practicing 3.5 hours per day is a great thing. But then
Yes.
you have to really fight hard against him and keep him silent for say next 3 weeks or so.
Okay, sir. And sir, using insole, will it help him?
That depends on his foot structure, madam, because insole will not help in tibial apophysitis or Osgood-Schlatter.
Okay, sir. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Flat foot requires operative.
Very rarely.
Okay. Kindly throw light on soft tissue swelling post major trauma.
Okay, so major trauma and soft tissue swelling without any fracture. So this is a very important condition, and it is called as internal deglowing. It can range from a scalp, something as innocuous as a scalp hematoma, to severe deglowing of the leg. And that deglowing, most important thing is to keep on following up the patient, because day one or patient will usually come with a history of run over or direct trauma or direct dash. Do check on vascular status, distal vascular status, distal to the injury, because blood vessels can get damaged. Then do check on the skin condition. If there are minimal friction burns which can be seen, or just small, very inconspicuous damage to the skin, just make a note of it in your mind and have a second look after 48 hours. Have a third look after 72 hours. Keep on having a look, because the skin can gradually lose its blood supply, and then the things will be really scary after say 4 or 5 days. So counseling the patient on day one who has a direct soft tissue injury with hematoma or deglowing is very important. Telling them that this is a minor thing, but this can turn into a major one, and we need to observe it, and strict rest is necessary, is what is required.
My son is studying in 11th standard, attending classes for 8 hours on laptop, having cervical pain since 5 to 6 months.
Very interesting question, because when we were students, cervical spondylosis was a condition of 40. 40ला चष्मा लागतो, तसंच 40ला मानदुखी, पाठदुखी लागते. पण human race has turned to more of intelligent work rather than physical work over last a century, we can say. With that, what has happened is we are more into these gadgets and more stuck to these gadgets, and that leads to strain on the cervical spine. Ask him to spend the equal amount of time as he spends on the laptop in the field or doing exercises. That's the only thing I can say.
Does every flat foot person needs customized shoe with insole if there are no symptoms?
Yes, flat foot will need customized sole compulsorily, symptoms or no symptoms. If you have flat foot, you should use customized soles, because someday or the other you are going to develop symptoms. Believe me, not in the foot, but you can develop symptoms in the knee, hip, back, everything, because all weight transmission is one. डोक्याचं वजन मानेत, मानेचं वजन पाठीत, पाठीचं कमरेत, कमरेतनं खुब्यात, खुब्यातून गुडघ्यात, गुडघ्यातून टाचेत, पावलात. हे सगळं एक आहे, हे लक्षात ठेवा. So if you have problem in one area, to prevent problem in that area and other areas, you should rectify that. And flat foot is very, very easily rectifiable and very, very easily treatable.
Can we compensate walking on tar road with a special type of shoes? I guess yes.
Yeah, because upper limit of as I have seen, Adidas has come up with something called as Ultra Boost of 17,000 rupees is the cost of shoes. So you will feel like you are floating practically.
Muscle cramps repeatedly occur. Okay. Calcium level is normal. What to do?
Calcium level has nothing to do with muscle cramps. Calcium level in the blood is going to be always normal, except in conditions like hyperparathyroidism or hypoparathyroidism. Calcium levels, if they are not normal, means patient is in ICU. Okay, so muscle cramps and calcium levels, that is not the issue. What is required here is tocotrienols or vitamin E and vitamin B12. and vitamin D. So
Potassium and manganese.
and potassium, yes. So all these things.
About 40 age pain in shin bone, especially in joggers.
That is stress fracture. So if you are doing it over enthusiastically, it can lead to micro trauma of the bone. X-rays will be normal, and if you do a CT scan, there will be a break in the bridging structure of the bone that leads to pain.
I think yes. I think we have answered almost all 24 plus 12
Wow.
questions.
That's great.
So it has been a lecture plus a question answer session. And since our convener, Dr. Azaz, because of our technical problem, we have been unable. Sir is there with us, but on behalf of Dr. Azaz, let me take this opportunity to thank you, and I request Secretary Dr. Joshi sir to express vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. I, Dr. Sriram Joshi, Secretary, GPA Pune, extremely thankful to today's speaker, Dr. Rushikesh Badwe sir, for giving us a lecture on different subject, which is very useful to all of us. I also thankful to today's convener, Dr. Ejaz Maniyar. I also thankful to today's technical partner, White Code Solution. I also thank to our scientific committee chairman, Dr. Prakash Mahadan sir and Dr. Praveen Darak sir. And last but not least, to all doctor for attending this today's lecture. Thanks all. Take care for yourself and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Thanks.
सर तुम्ही म्हणला कस्टमाइज हे